Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, our focus on the state of business in Sri Lanka continues with insights from Hiroshini Fernando, the CEO and Executive Director of RIL Properties. The LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index lost 4 basis points in June. We discuss the reasons for the decline with Sharang Pant, Nielsen's Managing Director. And the final word goes to LMD's columnist Hiroshini Fernando with his assessment of Sri Lanka's macro outlook. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Hello, thank you for looking in on Benchmark, the Big Picture Business Program. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. Today in our studio, coming in for a discussion on the state of business is Hiroshini Fernando, Chief Executive Officer of RIL Property. And as I mentioned, we are discussing the state of business in Sri Lanka. We're going to cover a number of issues related to the state of business, including policy reforms, what needs to be changed, what needs to be brought forth to encourage local business, and also how entrepreneurship could be promoted to ensure that development takes place. So Hiroshini, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Savitri, for the invitation.
Just starting off, what is your assessment of Sri Lanka's business climate at the moment, very briefly?
I think the Sri Lanka's business climate is very volatile because the governments, the regulators keep changing most of the policies in ad hoc level. It's very difficult for any businesses to be focused on what they want to be doing. The changes that the policymakers make immediately causes big issues, which in turn affects the organization. Like, for example, the automobile industry, which faces regulatory changes at frequent intervals. And the policies like Land Alienation Act, which come into play, where even public liability companies are faced with situations like that, where public PLC companies actually don't have any control of how their shareholding is going to be. Today they might be a local company, tomorrow it might be a foreign company. So even companies like that get affected in enactment of legislations like this. Now the new Inland Revenue Act, which has come in, which is actually asking the organizations to identify what their assets are, whether it's a business asset or a investment asset, because usually organizations which have funds, additional funds, would go in for investment in land, which is the most prudent thing to do. But then in such a scenario, the act now defines that if it's an investment asset, that should not be used for any of your business activities, because if it is used so, then it becomes a business asset and then you're taxed at a higher rate.
Looking at local businesses, what sectors are you seeing promise of growth?
I think we are very familiar with agricultural, trade and service sectors in Sri Lanka, and I think Sri Lanka has been an agricultural focused sector for such a long time, but currently I think the service sector is the one which is showing promise and potential. So actually, with the service sector improving because of our workforce and the MNCs joining in to contribute or take part of that development, it will create the industrial growth as well, because through the service sector, when the MNCs set up, we will have demand for grade A office space and also residences, which in turn will spur the industrial growth. So it's the sector that will bring in growth to Sri Lanka.
As a country, we have set for ourselves some very ambitious targets. For instance, Sri Lanka tourism has a revenue target of 4.5 billion US dollars, 20 billion in exports by 2020, FDI is 2.5 billion by this year, and 5 billion by 2020. Now, given our business environment and the current infrastructure, do you think all this supports the achievement of these goals that we have?
I think the government is taking initiative. I think as per the ease of doing business index, Sri Lanka has has come up to, I think, 110th level as per 2017 statistics, if I'm not mistaken. So those indexes increasing give confidence to the investing community, because I think the Register of Companies, BOI, the UDA has taken initiatives to reduce the number of days in carrying out the registration of companies, the approval process for development, which is a good thing. So if they can actually not limit it to hearsay only and ensure that it is actually carried out, then yes, I think we can try to achieve the, I think the business index, the ease of doing business index, the target is for Sri Lanka to be 70 by the year 2020.
Well, currently we are not doing too well, but we hope
yes,
that eventually it will work out. Another problem that Sri Lanka seems to be having is talent retention and talent attraction. While our national unemployment rate is 4.2% only, which looks very good statistically, when it comes to the 20 to 24-year-olds, it has increased phenomenally to 17.2 when it comes to unemployment among that level of people getting into the workforce. What can we do to actually ensure that these 20 to 24-year-olds or the graduates entering the workforce are assured of good employment?
It's quite disturbing to see that level, but actually when you know, because as organizations we have many vacancies in different segments of our organization. When we advertise for suitable people to apply for these positions, the applications that we get are not actually meeting the requirements, and at the same time, even if the people we think have potential come in, they are like now we call them the millennials, no? So they don't want to actually stay in for a longer period. They want to shift their positions, look for different jobs, and then at the same time the better persons migrate. And then in a different aspect, when we sign FTAs with other countries for even employment opportunities, I think it again gets politicized, and people start canvassing against it. They don't actually see the potential. Now, if we actually don't have the people who can work, we should be able to get down the people to fill in those vacancies. At the same time, our people also get a chance to go and work in those countries. So it has to be looked very positively. Our education system, I think, has been one of the better ones if you compare, because we have the free education and it's a privilege given to all of us. So again, after you leave your secondary education, when you go into universities, what you see there is again politics, and the students are not focusing on their studies. They are creating havoc in the streets. So they come or they leave the university with those mentalities, and then they cannot get absorbed into the workforce also. because they've already made up their minds on what they want to do.
You brought up a very valid point. Education is a privilege.
Yes.
And it's not a right,
That's
the free
right.
education part of it, and it's not free because the taxpayer pays money
Taxpayer
for it.
pays for it.
So Hiroshini, we are going to continue this discussion after a commercial break. And on the other side, we ask Hiroshini Fernando whether investments are sufficiently focused for development and important development projects, and also whether Sri Lanka can leverage the international partnerships it has and it intends to have to promote development. Do stay with us because we have a few commercials right now.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
$8,500 done. 1,500 go. Hoorah!
What on earth are you doing?
I'm making money.
You're crazy.
Crazy for money. 10,000 steps done. Who the man? I do it every single day. Show me the money.
So you run 10,000 steps every day, huh? You must be fit.
Some days I do 20,000. Hoorah!
Thank you for staying with Benchmark. We're now resuming our discussion about the state of business in Sri Lanka with Hiroshini Fernando, the Chief Executive Officer of RIL Property. Hiroshini, there's been a lot of talk about Sri Lanka becoming a high middle income country, but it's not easy to get there. What are the challenges we need to address first?
Again, I think we are talking about the same problem. Same problem is where the regulatory changes and the policies are inconsistency, and then again governance. Because for the foreign investors to come and invest with us, there should be stability in the country. Now we are talking about so many FDIs coming in. How many of that materialize? Because when you come here and then look at all the unrest that is happening around, I don't think the foreign investors have the confidence to invest. Only the major companies, the bigger companies who can take the risk will come in. So that in turn affects the income levels of the country.
Now, one of the issues, or one of the much talked about issues, is about entrepreneurship. There's talk about reviving entrepreneurship spirit among Sri Lankans and offering incentives and lower interest rates, etc., by the Minister of Finance recently. But how can entrepreneurship be promoted to support national development in a big overall context?
Entrepreneurship, I think Sri Lankans are very entrepreneurial. they have many ways of looking at things. They have innovative ways of looking at things. That is why Sri Lankans are able to get opportunities elsewhere, because they are able to go and serve, and they are also hardworking people. But again, more than the concessions or the interest rate reductions that an entrepreneur needs is the stability for them to decide, okay, this is how we are going to do it. If we have the assistance from the government on the procedures and the same legislations remain, then people are willing to take the risk, because entrepreneurship is taking a risk. So you need to be able to go forth and do that. So that is where the concern comes in.
So Hiroshini, in all this, do you think our investments are sufficiently focused and encouraged to support the big picture of development?
It is focused and supported, but not adequately enough. The governing bodies are more concerned about what's going to happen in the coming elections, because now with the polls that was held recently, it created such a havoc. So now the process of progressing on what the country needs to do is taken a step back. So I think we are a country which is changing our stances every time there is a political change. There is no,
from election to election.
Election to election, there is no consistency. So the focus is not on development of the country.
Just as a final question, what is your outlook for business in the for the rest of the year?
Business outlook is pretty bleak, but there is, I think, there is always a silver lining in the cloud, or light at the end of the tunnel. So hopefully we should be able to survive it and be able to sustain ourselves till much better stability arrives.
Thank you, Hiroshini. I just hope that actually happens, where things will think about looking up for Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So we've been discussing the state of business, the nuances of the state of business, and what should be done and shouldn't be done to make Sri Lanka that high middle income country that we want it to be, with Hiroshini Fernando, the Chief Executive Officer of RIL Property. And on the other side, we have Anushan Selvaraja, who will be back with more.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Done. 1,500 go. Hoorah!
What on earth are you doing?
I'm making money.
You're crazy.
Crazy for money. 10,000 steps done. Who the man? I do it every single day. Show me the money.
So you run 10,000 steps every day, huh? You must be fit.
Some days I do 20,000. Hoorah!
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the Business Confidence Index. Joining me is the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharang Pal. Welcome back to the show, Sharang. Now, to start off with, the BCI has dropped marginally. What are the sensitivities behind this?
The BCI dipped to 102 from 106 last month, so yes, there's a marginal dip. Rather than the BCI dip, I would say the consumer confidence dip will be a bigger worry this time. So from the previous month's level of 51, it has come down to 45. So what are the reasons behind this dip? And when we asked consumers as well as business leaders, they mentioned that the recent news on the GDP growth is not too impressive. The GDP grew by about 3.2% in the first quarter of 2018, which is very similar to the last quarter of 2017. So that's a bit worrying. And the bigger worry in the GDP numbers is the growth shown by the industry sector. So while the agriculture did show a pickup and grew at around 4.8%, industry grew just by 0.9%. And a big contributor to this slowdown was construction, which directly relates back to business confidence. So that's coming up as a worry. The other worry is the re-emergence of inflation. So in the month of March or April, where inflation was easing or slowing, in the month of May, because of the fuel price hikes, inflation has started to move up again. It's again moved up month on month, and we see that the prices of fuel or utilities have started going up. While the slowdown in prices of coconuts or rice is helping the consumer, the rise in prices of fuel and utilities is not really helping. So these are few reasons which are causing concern both amongst consumers as well as business leaders.
Has the value of the currency had any impact?
Yes, the depreciation in currency comes up as the third biggest reason or worry when it comes to business front. Almost about 3 in 4 leaders talk about currency as one of the concerns. But if you look at the overall macroeconomics, rather than this coming up as a macro issue for Sri Lanka, it's more to do with strengthening of the US dollar. The US dollar has basically appreciated across currencies globally. So it's not really a worry as to the strength of the rupee over here. But yes, it does make cost of doing business a bit more difficult.
Right. So how do respondents view our economic and business prospects going forward?
The sentiments on the economy are more or less the same. Almost 55% of the leaders feel economy will remain where it is. 44% of them say that the economy might further deteriorate, so which is a worry. When it comes to business prospects, just about 12% in the short term and 14% in the long term feel that the business will improve. Same are the sentiments when it comes to investments. Almost 50% of the business leaders feel that the investment prospects are fair to good. None of them say that the investment prospects are very good at this point of time, and it reflects in their plans on expansion of workforce as well. 80% of the leaders are still saying they will maintain their workforce with no increase at all.
So what are the top most pressing issues faced by the country at this point of time, Shra?
On the global front or on the local front, the top issues coming up are around stability. So whether it's stability to do with the global trade, given the US sanctions which are coming up, or it's stability locally in terms of policies and political stability. That comes up as top reason. The other reasons locally are around corruption and ethnic issues. These would be the top 3 reasons of national impact.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sharang.
Thank you.
That was the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharang Park. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anshin Selvaraja. Now for a close look at the latest of the economy, joining me is economist and LMD columnist Hiroshini Fernando. Welcome back to the show, Hiroshini. Now, there's been a lot of hue and cry about this, the position of our rupee, its ups and downs, and that it's gone to its lowest now. The government is doing it wrong, etc., etc. Isn't this a natural reaction to what the central bank is trying to do?
Yes, so it is a natural reaction because it's more market based now and very much dependent on what happens externally. So right now we're seeing the US dollar strengthening with the Federal Reserve raising rates, with data coming out better and the economy doing much better. Money is flowing out of markets like Sri Lanka. I think emerging markets as a whole in the second quarter of this year, the June quarter saw its largest outflow since September 2015. So emerging markets have not done well. So if you look at even currencies like India, they've depreciated over 8%. The rupee has done, Indonesian rupee has not done too well. Other currencies like the Pakistani currency has also not done too well. So we have actually, relative to them, not done as bad, which I guess is a savings, which is possibly a positive, but also it also highlights the vulnerability, because in moments like this, that's where the fact that the economy is more stable, you have better policies coming from the central bank really helps. Then you don't have too much of panic and too much of money flowing out of countries like Sri Lanka.
What is local sentiment like about our economy, Hiroshini?
So the sentiment, I think, is very much dominated by this rupee movement. I think that's the key thing. Sentiment is also, I think, has been suppressed for a long time because of the mismatch between what was expected, especially with the government and policymakers coming in 2015, to what has been delivered so far, and the slow pace of it. I think one thing you can't take away is that there has been a significant level of reform. You've seen, a new tax code, you've seen a new foreign bill, you've seen the right to information, and you've seen a new active liability management act, which is more forward thinking. So they have done things, but maybe not at the pace of it. So because of that, I think whatever stability that has been derived over the last 6 to 8 months really is not being resonated, and that's reflected in sentiment being low as well.
Where do we stand then in terms of our debt repayments?
So the first half, I think, was the most significant chunk of it, and in the second half, if you look at some of the Treasury annual report data coming in as well, there's only about another 40% more to go this year. Most of it is also domestic debt, which is being refinanced as well, so that is manageable. Central bank has been very proactive on it. I think central bank has also gone out to the market, raised $2.5 billion, got another syndicated loan. So they've pretty much essentially created a degree of buffer into it for next year, which I think will make sure that things are more manageable. What will, I think, really matter is the appetite for future sovereign bonds or even syndicated loans, and whether we'll be able to continue this rolling over of our existing debt and easing the maturity. I think that's the most important thing. I think 2019 to 2022, the bunching up is the issue. How can we maybe buy back some of these bonds, reissue it for maybe another 10 years and spread that risk? You necessarily won't reduce your debt, but spread the cash flow risk of trying to repay it consecutively each year.
Thank you very much for joining us, Hiroshini.
Pleasure.
That was economist and LMD columnist Hiroshini Fernando. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.